So, ahead of Stockholm +50, UNDP organized country consultations in over 50 countries where representatives from all over society came together to discuss their concerns, expectations, and suggestions for Stockholm +50 conference. So I have two new guests here. So we have Minister Gustavo Manrique and Matilde Mort. Bienvenido. So let me start with you. So you're the Minister of Environment, Water, and Ecological Transition. So tell me, what do you mean with this last part of your title, ecological transition? What does it mean?
Well, first, thanks for the invitation. For me, it's an honor to share this scenario with you and with Matilde from UNPD, from Ecuador. Ecological transition, I think it's a way of living that all the citizens, the countries, should apply. What is transition? Transition is moving from point A to point B. It is breaking the quo status. So we're a new government. We started last year, and at day 9, we signed a decree, a national decree, in order to send the message that Ecuador start a really serious movement to change that inertia. So the pillars are sustainability, circular economy, zero net carbon emission, and water. So we are the 4th country that apply this public policy of ecological transition. So it's a matter of start moving, start switching, start a process of decarbonization, a serious process about that. So we have accomplished some really nice goals in this 12 months of administration.
Okay. So Matilde Mort, so you're UNDP's resident representative in Ecuador. So, and you hosted the country consultations that then led up to Stockholm +50. Can you describe what came out of this consultation process?
Of course, and well, again, thank you for the invitation. Maybe before answering the question, I wanted to talk a little about the context. So Ecuador is a mega diverse country. It has 4 very distinct different regions, the Andean highlands, the Amazon, the Pacific coast, and Galapagos. And this makes it a fantastic scenery and landscape and ecosystem and biodiverse country. No? And it also has a great human diversity. It's an area of a little bit less than half of Sweden, but it still contains 13 different indigenous populations and nationalities. And for many of these people in Ecuador, the environment is not only the source of resources and livelihoods, but it's also a heritage from the ancestors, it's part of their spirituality, and it's part of the vision and of the world and humanity as one. And there is a specific people, the Sarayaku people, who live in the Amazon region, and they speak to us about the Causaxacha, which means the living jungle. And so this is a jungle that is a living being in which all mineral world, the animal world, the vegetable world, the cosmic world lives. And why am I saying this? Because we made these consultations in a context of a people that is very much connected to Pachamama, as it's known, Mother Earth, no? So in terms of the consultation itself, I mean, we knew from the beginning that it had to be inclusive and participatory. So we made a specific outreach to different groups, indigenous groups, Afro-descendant groups, women, youth, LGBTQ community, people with disabilities, and so on. And we had a very large, of course, digital consultation. But also knowing the digital gap, we complemented that with different workshops and interviews and so on. And we also gave the methodology to different groups. So the Confederation of Amazonian indigenous peoples, they replicated the consultations on their own. So it was really a very rich process. So what did we get from this? We had 2,500 persons involved, and I would say also collaborating in a global conversation, because as UNDP we provided a digital space for having not only the consultations at a national level but also globally, And a couple of results from the consultations that I find interesting, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this with the Minister. It's issues like the need for strengthening governance systems and for better articulation between different actors is one of the issues that came up. There was a lot of mention also to greater financing, and I think David Boyd mentioned this in the previous section, and also technology transfer, and in general capacity building, because there is a feeling that the technology is out there, but there's not the full access to it, There was also a mention to communication, to improve communication and more education and investment in education for sustainable development. Changing economic systems, of course, circular economies, dependence on, reduce the dependence on non-renewable resources and so on. But again, the issue of citizen participation came up. So strengthen citizen participation mechanisms and so on. And perhaps in relation to that, mention also this Andean, in the Andean culture, you have this concept of the minga, la minga. I love that. When I came to Ecuador, I suddenly started hearing about la minga. So la minga is when everybody joins forces to get something done. So communities go out, neighborhoods go out, they clean their streets, they participate. And I think that's a beautiful concept that is also part of this ecological transition, all joining forces.
Wow, sounds like a perfect contribution to the Stockholm +50 process, bringing that spirit. So we have a short video, because the country consultations took place in over 50 countries. So I think we're going to get a video introduction to these discussions that were held all over the world.
Still 71% of waste in Vietnam is going to landfill.
So, Minister, I think I have one question for you now, just to kick this off. I think we've heard about the pan-Latin American climate work. So there seems to be some collaborations between Latin American ministers on climate issues. Can you tell us a little bit about that? How is that going, and how's my home country, Chile, doing on those conversations?
Sure. Well, I'm really impressed how is the collaboration moving towards. We have been working together with several ministers around the world, to be honest, We have some closest because of geographic matter, which we are working more tight. But in general terms, we are working really close from some Nordic ministers, for example, Norig, or in Germany as well. And they are really aware, I'm going later on to the region, but talking about Norig or, for example, Germany, they are really aware of protecting our forest and our communities. So, for example, with the UK as well, we just signed a very important agreement, economic and advising collaboration for the south region of Ecuador with a transborder project with Peru, which will protect the landscape. But this is a new term. We're used to hear the landscape, and you think as a view, but it's all which is around the communities, and work with bio-entrepreneurs and non-deforest service and products. So with UK, we have been working with Lord Zach Goldsmith very close in different projects, as well with UK, with Galapagos Island. Then with Germany, and actually through a project with the PNUD, UNPD, with Matilde, we have Pro Amazonia, which we are working really close. For example, we export recently, I think it was 250 quintales, I don't know how to translate that unit, to France, and of coffee. And it's coffee produced by local communities. And what it's the world valuing now, it's that coffee, it is produced by local community, but by no deforesting. So it has a seal of non-deforesting. And in the region, we have been close, working really close with what we call the marine corridor, which is, you know, that when I was young, they taught us that Ecuador were neighbors with Colombia and Peru and the Pacific Ocean. But we have a border, a marine border with Costa Rica. Our international waters connect with the international waters of Costa Rica. And for those who know Galapagos, Galapagos is a consequence of volcanic explosions millions of years ago. And what we see, it's what it's over the water. And that's the biodiversity that Matilde was saying, that, that's the place where Charles Darwin inspired the evolution theory. So that's what you see. But it happened to be that underwater, you have these submarine mountains that connect underwater with Costa Rica. And Costa Rica connect with Panama up north and to Colombia. And these species that are not fishing target species, such as whales, manta rays, turtles, and some others, choose these submarine mountains to have a swimway, just as a highway, because of the riches of the food. So we decide, these four countries together, the ministers obviously coming from the president, the decision to create the biggest transborder marine corridor. And we signed that in Glasgow, and we as Ecuador increased 6 million hectares of protected area. And as well did it Colombia, Panama, and Costa Rica. So we create this transborder. So there are plenty ways that I can share you of different supporting that we are. The borders were created by humans. The species doesn't know about borders. So we must work together in a unique strategy to manage our planet as a whole system. There is I love this, and I finish with this. We have to drop the S of the oceans. That's another thing that they taught us when we were young. Oceans. 83% of the waste we collect in Galapagos, 83% come from another continent. So we have local problems that the only way to solve them is with global solutions.
Can I connect back to our previous on the previous panel, just on to you, Minister? I mean, so the ambition is to push an ecological transition, right? And do that.
What?
The ecological transition.
Sure.
You mentioned that, and in a collaborative spirit. At the same time, I mean, that in itself is challenging, right? I mean, that's not easy. At the same time, in the last years, you have the pandemic, you have the repercussions of the war on Ukraine. How has that affected your work and the conversations you have with other ministers in Latin America?
Sure. I'm a pathological, optimistic guy. I really see always the positive things about things. And I truly believe that we're moving forward. We're here. I just came from Davos last week, the Economic World Forum, and I think that the transversal issue, the conversation was sustainability. So I read the other day as well that after the pandemic, I don't remember the source, but the data was that 4,000% it has increased the awareness of sustainability after pandemic. So I think that the people is more able to talk about that, more able to they understood that if we lower a little bit the production or change the way, just as the pandemic obliged us, will be better. So I've been in this for 25 years, and I truly believe or feel that we are in a better environment to bring this to the table. I think it's a matter of survival, not just as a species, but in the business way, in something, depending on the country you are, but between 5 years or 10 years, if you don't have a purpose, your company will die. No one will choose it. It doesn't matter if you're in South America or in a very developed Nordic country. So it's a matter of survival, not just from the point of view of as a planet, whole living system, but as a business-wise, it's a customer decision.
And I mean, building on that, I have a question for you, Matilde, because I think one of the messages for Stockholm +50, and I think also what came out very strongly in the latest report from the IPCC, was the need for structural deep change, transformation. So, I mean, from your point of view and your experience, is that happening? Are we seeing these deeper changes? And how do you make sure that we're just not nudging around the corners or adapting a little bit, but actually really creating deeper system changes?
Yes, so we have all these transformative agendas on the table, no? The Agenda 2030 and the 17 SDGs, the Paris Agreement, the Sendai for disaster risk reduction, to name just a few of all these agendas that have come forward during the last years. And so how are we actually, how do we actually sustain or promote this transformative effect that these agendas are proposing? Now, and I think I would like to mention there the UNDP Human Development Report of 2020, which is called the Human Development in the Anthropocene, which has, I think, quite a few insights in how we can actually make these changes. One is the concept of agency, personal agency, and I think also the business sector agency in terms of how we actually can change things. Agency is important, for instance, for changing social norms. And we might say, well, cultural changes, social norms take time to change, but not necessarily. For instance, the issue of smoking perhaps 30, 40 years ago, it was fanciful to smoke. And today, we all know the repercussions on health and so on. And there's a systemic change in the world in terms of smoking. And I think that's happening, as you were saying, Gustavo, around sustainability and environmental sustainability. So that's one of the ways of change, social norms. The other ones is the incentives to change. Government regulations, fiscal incentives, and so on and so forth. And I think that is happening more and more. For instance, in Ecuador, we are doing a review of the fiscal system to see what kind of subsidies there are that are harmful for the environment. And then we're working together, of course, with the Minister of Environment and Water and Ecological Transition towards changing these systems. And finally, one of the other things that this report mentioned is the nature-based solutions, which is working with local communities, indigenous communities, with using nature in many different ways in the economic sectors. And perhaps a couple of examples from what we're doing in Ecuador with UNDP. We're promoting green infrastructure plans as disaster risk reduction instruments in cities. You mentioned the example of Pro Amazonia with the deforestation-free commodities, deforestation-free coffee, deforestation-free cocoa, working also in the livestock sector and so on. So, I mean, these are only a couple of examples, but I do think there are many, many more. And part of this is, of course, also the availability of finance. You mentioned, well, you've been working with the Galapagos and also finding the financing for sustaining this new agreement between the 4 countries. But if you see globally, financing for environmental sustainability or green finance has grown exponentially, and there's a huge potential there for also changing systems.
That's an interesting observation. I'm thinking another challenging part of this, and I'm going to put you on the spot here, Minister, because I think this is a difficult question for anyone in government. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. And that is how to avoid lock-in during a crisis. So, for example, after the pandemic and during the pandemic, there was this notion and idea that we could build back better, right? So invest in ways that would promote sustainability rather than just continue to lock us into an old fossil fuel infrastructure, for example. What's your take on this as part of a government? Do you believe that you managed to avoid that type of locking that we've seen in other countries in terms of just continue to strengthen existing structures, or did you manage to actually divert some of that recovery into something more sustainable? I know it's a difficult question, but I think everyone is struggling with that.
It's a really great question. It's tough to say. Again, I think there's only one answer for that. It will depend in the country you were born. In Ecuador, we have unfulfilled basic needs. For you to let you know, I have a policy not to talk bad about my country when I'm out of the country, but to make the point of this extraordinary question, we have the highest rate in child malnutrition in the region, 1 every 3 kids. So we don't have water, fresh water, and I'm going later on to that point. In some regions of the country, we don't have sanitation in some regions. We need to create some economic system in order for other countries to help us, you know. We were one of the 4th city, Guayaquil, that was more hit in the world globally for COVID. Guayaquil was the 4th city with more deaths by hour. So it is hard to say that you have to lock or unlock. I think it will depend the industry, the product, the richness of the country, the GDP, and so I don't know. It's hard to have a concrete answer.
Yeah. Do you have anything on that, Matilda?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. You have all these vulnerabilities, and I think it's hard to see beyond the vulnerabilities when you are in such a crisis context. And I mean, we lived through it with the pandemic, and I think we're going to live through it again very soon with the pressure on agricultural systems due to the war in Ukraine. But I think that in the midst of these uncertainties and social needs, I think there are quite a lot of opportunities. And I was mentioning the finance, the growth in green finance. Of course, there are differences. If you see Europe, for instance, had huge packages that also incentivated green transformations, social financial packages, but with a condition. No? And I think we have not seen that in the Latin American region. It's like way behind. I think perhaps I think the figure is 2% of what was invested for the pandemic recovery had a green dimension to it. But despite that, and on the finance sector, for instance, in Ecuador, we're working with the cooperative sector. The cooperative sector is 1/3 of the financial sector in Ecuador. And we just supported them to do the environmental and social risk analysis system. And that is the basis for green credits. And now there's a huge amount of green credits coming in through the cooperative sector, and where we then can work with transforming agricultural systems, going towards electromobility and so on and so forth. And this is also happening on the private side. There's a lot of financing coming to the private banks to accompany the private sector to do this transformation. So yes, there is a huge social need, but at the same time, there are many things happening that are leading towards this change also.
That's very interesting.
Just a short comment on that we are, as Matilda said in the first intervention, the most mega-diverse country in the world per species per square kilometer. We have in 1 hectare of the Amazon more species than together Canada and United States together in 1 hectare. So we are really giving an ecosystemic service to the world. The thing is that we haven't negotiated before that with the country. I really, as a citizen, Ecuadorian citizen, I really feel as a rich country in terms that we have preserved that mega-diverse. And the other, I really see the biodiverse of our country as a currency. The currency that the world needs in order to survive by preserving it. The thing is, we have to know how to value a jaguar, a tiger, a monkey, a plant. And we have to step in and negotiate with rich countries. And they have to pay. We only contribute 0.18% of the gas emissions worldwide. But we are #1 in megadiversity. There's not a balance there, And the second thing that the world needs for this ecological transition is the minerals, You need the silicio for solar panels. You need the aluminium for the frame. You need a lot of things. And we're really rich on that as well. So I think that the challenge, and the thing is, one is on the top and the other one is underground. So how to manage that by giving the communities that in the past, they haven't been attend, you say? They haven't been, with no water, no electricity. So we have to combine those 3 things because Ecuador needs resources to fulfill the chronic child malnutrition.
we need to wrap up there. I'm sorry, Matilda. I know we could have gone on for many hours. I want to thank you so much for taking the time in your very busy calendars to join us here. Thank you very much, Matilda Mort, and Minister Gustavo Manrique for joining us. And for the audience, thank you very much for joining the UNDP Hour. The session tomorrow will take stock of the footprint of Stockholm +50. What did the 1972 conference mean, and what can we expect 50 years later? And our guests will be the Swedish Minister for International Development Cooperation, Matilda Ernkrans, and UNDP's Administrator, Achim Steiner, and Ambassador Jan Mårtensson, who played a key role during the conference in 1972. And here to moderate that session is the chair of Stockholm Environment Institute and former Climate Minister of Sweden, Miss Isabella Lövin. Thank you very much, and see you all tomorrow.